For 500 years, Rome was a republic. It started as this small city, but it grew and grew, conquering all of Italy and then the entire Mediterranean.
And then, for another 500 years, it ruled as an empire. This is the Rome you've probably seen in the movies, a total behemoth of military power, incredible engineering, and a culture that would literally define Western civilization.
Now, the Romans themselves, they definitely didn't see an end in sight. They genuinely believed their power was a gift from the gods, prophesied to be an imperium sine fine, an empire without an end. And this quote, well, it says it all, doesn't it? In their own foundational epic poem, the king of the gods himself promises them an eternal empire. This unshakable belief in their own destiny is exactly what makes their eventual fall so incredibly dramatic. But here's the thing. Long before the final collapse, the foundations of this gigantic empire were already rotting from within. So, the first reasons for the fall, they weren't external threats. It was a slow, creeping decay happening right at home. Just look at this timeline. It shows the sheer chaos of what's called the crisis of the 3rd century. For 50 brutal years, Rome nearly tore itself apart. Emperors were being assassinated one after another. In 1 year alone, there were 6 different guys claiming to be emperor. The whole empire even fractured into 3 warring states. It was a terrifying preview of what was to come.
So what was going on? Well, the empire was basically bleeding out from 1,000 self-inflicted cuts. You had endless civil wars that drained its manpower. The whole thing had just gotten too big to govern properly. And to pay for its massive army, emperors started debasing the currency, mixing cheap metals into the silver coins. As you can guess, that triggered runaway inflation and absolutely crushed the economy.
Now, all of this internal chaos, it didn't exactly go unnoticed. It left the borders dangerously exposed, and some very powerful groups were starting to gather right on the frontiers.
Now, Roman propaganda painted this really simple picture of savage barbarians who just wanted to destroy everything. But the reality, it was way more complex. We're talking about entire peoples on the move, Goths, Vandals, Franks, and a lot of them were being pushed towards Roman lands by other conflicts, like the arrival of the Huns from the east. It wasn't one single army. It was just this constant, overwhelming pressure on an already weakened border. And while Rome was dealing with all these threats from the outside, a profound social revolution was happening on the inside, one that would completely change what it even meant to be Roman.
The rise of Christianity was a massive cultural shift. Think about it. Traditional Roman values, the state gods, even the idea of the emperor as a divine figure, all of that was being challenged. This new faith started redirecting people's loyalties and resources away from the old imperial machine and toward a completely new center of power, the church. So let's put it all together. You've got the internal rot, the external pressure, and this huge social change. It's the perfect storm. And it all led to a moment that for centuries Romans would have thought was completely and utterly impossible.
In the year 410, for the first time in 800 years, the sacred walls of the city of Rome itself were breached. The city was sacked by the Visigoths under their king, Alaric.
The psychological shockwave from this, it was immense. You can just feel the despair in this quote. For centuries, Rome wasn't just a city, it was the center of the universe, the eternal city. If Rome itself could fall, what was safe? What was permanent anymore? It shattered their entire worldview. And then, just a few decades later, it happened again. In 455, the Vandals came up the river and hit the city with a second, even more devastating sack. This was pretty much the final blow, the one the Western Roman Empire would just never recover from.
So, with all these different factors at play, you gotta ask, was it really a sudden, dramatic fall? Or was it something else entirely? A lot of historians today see it in a very different light.
There's a famous saying that I think just hits the nail on the head. It argues that there wasn't one single cause or one single event. Instead, the empire was pushed over the edge by the combined, crushing weight of all of these internal and external problems happening over a long, messy period of time.
So instead of thinking of it as a sudden death, it's probably more accurate to see it as a slow, painful transformation. By the year 500, the political thing we call the Western Roman Empire was gone. In its place was a patchwork of Germanic kingdoms that would actually form the basis of medieval and eventually modern Europe.
And the epic story of Rome's decline leaves us with a really provocative thought, one that, still resonates today. Does it suggest that periods of crisis, decline, and transformation are just an inevitable cycle for all great powers?